insights and market research firms. So I've kind of played in that space, more independent consulting. And then right at 2 years ago, I joined the National Retail Federation, NRF, as NRF's first VP for sustainability. NRF, for those that are not familiar with it, NRF is the world's largest trade association for retailers. So we have players from the Amazons and Walmarts of the world, all the way down to small mom and pop organizations. And my role as VP of Sustainability and Corporate Social Responsibility is to kind of help our members understand what's happening in the retail space when it comes to sustainability. It's the opportunity for retailers to benchmark against each other without public glare. It's the opportunity for retailers to share tricks of the trade, identify common challenges, and begin talking about how one builds common solutions. So to a certain extent, it's a researcher's dream, and I'm sharing that with all of you because it is a researcher's dream. I have access to all the coolest sustainability people at all of these different retailers. So please keep that in mind when you think about questions. So I do have a PowerPoint presentation, but I am more than happy to begin this with a couple of questions. If any of you have one or two key questions that you absolutely want to make sure gets covered, I am perfectly happy opening the floor to questions before I begin. I see one hand up. Is it Danny Davis?
You got the last part right. It's Danae Davis.
Danae, I'm sorry. Oh, look at there. This is my
right.
old eyeballs not being able to read the tiny print.
It's okay. It's all right. Thank you so much.
Dr. Davis, what's going on in your head?
So I still need to know, just very generally sustainability, and that's why I'm here. I like to learn new things. I'm a teacher educator working with elementary folks, and we have 1 or 2 classes on the environment, and sustainability is actually a word I'm using for the first time this year.
Oh, cool.
But here's what I want to know. How are companies, what's the question I had before I got on? Are companies kind of doing this on their own, or are they acting because they're getting external forces? So where are companies in their responsiveness to sustainability? So
I love it. I'm writing it down, and we'll definitely cover it. And if not, put your hand back up and say, hey, you promised and you didn't.
Thanks. All right.
All right, got it. Yep. Others?
I'm actually wondering, as we prepare students, since we're all educators, what do you think are the key skill sets that they need to be prepared for the future of retail when it relates to sustainability?
Ooh, yeah, I like that one too. Good. We can definitely cover that. I'll take 2 more questions, then I'm just going to bounce in and start babbling. Don't make me call people out. Greg, I'm going to pick on you just because you were on camera early on.
Well, let's see. I would say, what do you see as the biggest trends in terms of sustainability in the supply chain?
Yep. Excellent. Biggest trends in supply chain. And then Dr. Rana, who was making fun of my TikTok skills. I'm picking on you for the last question. Are you there and able to throw a question my way? And you're on mute if you're talking. And no worries, I'll just bounce. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And here's the rule. So thumbs up, you guys can see the screen. All right. So here's the rule. At this point, I can only see a few faces. If anyone has a question at any point in this presentation, take yourself off mute and yell time out to have a question, and we'll circle back. And so I think the plan is I'm just going to run rapid speed for 15 minutes at most, and then we'll open it up to a broader conversation. Good? All right. So we'll start with my declaration that sustainable retail is in fact the future of commerce. And let's see, there we go. So this gets to an example I've used for a while. It gets around to the definition of sustainability. And I use this because sustainability is very challenging to describe for a lot of people. It's challenging to define. So for those of you not familiar with this ancient story of the blindfolded wise people who had never encountered an elephant. It's a classic story. I'm going to tell it anyway. Most of you know it, but it is the classic story of a group of blindfolded wise people who are invited into a tent, having never before in their lives seen an elephant. And as the wise blindfolded people walk in, each of them tackles a different piece of the elephant. One announces that an elephant is in fact much like a big, long, strong snake because they had felt the trunk of the elephant. Another actually announces with great enthusiasm and excitement and declares, no, an elephant is much like the trunk of a tree, having explored one of the four legs. Another, having explored the side of the elephant, says, no, 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 no. An elephant is in fact a big, flat, leathery wall with some muscular texture beneath it. Another feels the tail of the elephant and pronounces that an elephant is much like a rope. And they proceed to argue and argue and argue about what the heck an elephant is, not ever realizing that in fact they were all describing the exact same beast, just from a very different perspective. So why that babbling? Because this is very much how sustainability has unfolded across the entire economy, but particularly across the retail sector, because different retailers, driven by different consumer interests, have defined sustainability slightly differently. They followed the consumer or their investors or their employees, and many of them have focused on only a small piece of the sustainability elephant. What I learned when I joined NRF, whoops, if we can go back, is that in fact the retail industry is a herd of elephants, and they're not all necessarily moving in the same direction. And what you have is a bunch of industry experts, you have consultants, you have environmental activists, you have government regulators, all playing the role of the blindfolded wise people, running through a herd of elephants, all trying to describe what sustainability is. And I use this as an introduction because there are tons and tons and tons of terms and concepts that are all part of the broader definition of sustainability. So some people are now talking about regenerative supply chains or a circular economy or carbon footprints or water footprints or green buildings or ESG reporting or people, planet, profit. There are all of these concepts and terms that people are using to describe bits and pieces of sustainability. And this, by the way, pops up all the time. I see this in academic articles. I see this in mainstream press. I see it in lecturers on the stage. They end up talking about sustainability as if it's just a very, very narrow piece of what many of us who've been in the space a long time consider a broader sustainability umbrella. So what we needed to do at NRF was kind of come up with our standard definition for sustainability. Now, it is broad, I acknowledge that, but it's intentionally broad. So at NRF, at the National Retail Federation, we are defining sustainability as the ability to create net positive environmental, social, and community benefits. So note the environmental piece, the social piece, that's the people piece, and the community piece, creating net positive environmental, social, and community benefits. Now, some of the terminology, again, a lot of people talk about sustainability as kind of people, planet, profit, or people, planet, prosperity. that's still kind of the official mainstream kind of definition of sustainability. It's the intersection between those pieces. But if you kind of have played in this space a while, you would have seen corporate social responsibility, or CSR, begin bubbling up and being part of the conversation. And CSR, corporate social responsibility, became a really prominent piece of the conversation because too many people started focusing only on the environmental aspects of sustainability. And there was so much emphasis on just the environmental piece of sustainability that people wisely pushed back and said, no, 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 it's more than just the environment. Don't forget the social component. And so we went from sustainability conversations, which got narrowed to environmental conversations, broadened back to the people side of the equation. And then what happened is the investor community was like, you people are ridiculous. If it's not making money, it's not sustainable. And so it was the investment community that started wrapping metrics around sustainability, and they framed it in the ESG framework. So ESG is yet another kind of way of examining the issue, primarily from an investor perspective. What I find again in the space is people use these terms all interchangeably. And I'm not sure that's necessarily appropriate if you're really kind of mapping out what the sustainability taxonomy looks like. So we're trying to help our retailers think about sustainability as creating net positive environmental, social, and community benefits. So here's the big challenge for retailers. And some of our retail members hate it when I say this. The big challenge is that absolutely every single purchase or every single business decision has hidden human health, environmental, and social impacts. Every single decision, from where you buy your paper clips from, who made the paper clips, to the buildings themselves, to the products that retailers sell. And these hidden human health, environmental, and social impacts occur throughout the entire value chain of the retail industry. So it's not just the store operations. It's not just the electricity used in the store. Sustainability is, in fact, looking at those hidden human health, environmental, and social impacts throughout the entire supply chain, from your tier 1 supplier who you're getting products from, all the way down to the mine or the farm where the raw materials originate. So all the way through the supply chain, and the hidden human health, environmental, and social impacts of customer behavior, how customers are using the products, what customers do with the products when they no longer need them. All of this is part of the retail value chain and part of the retail sustainability story. So the 3 big trends, and I won't spend tons of time here, but we can come back to it at any point, but the big 3 trends that I talk about with retailers: 1, consumers care. There's bazillions of studies that we can walk you through. The surveys all show consumers care about this. Some 70% of consumers claim they would spend more on more sustainable products. They claim they would shop from more sustainable retailers. There's some consumer behaviors that are clearly indicating they do care, but there's also an interesting say-do gap, and retailers are kind of playing with that. Some of the more interesting consumer research is really showing that say-do gap, what consumers say they're going to do versus what they do, that say-do gap is actually shrinking for some consumers and for some retailers and brands that are telling more effective sustainability stories. So that's big trend number 1. Trend number 2 is transparency. So consumers are running around with computers in their pocket, connected to the World Wide Web, connected to information they want anywhere. Consumers have these expectations that they should be able to figure out who made the shirt I'm wearing, where the cotton originated, what kind of dyes were used, were the workers paid fairly. Consumers are increasingly asking for this kind of information. When I talk with retailers about transparency, the one warning I give them is there's a difference between voluntary transparency and forced transparency. And by forced transparency, I'm not actually worried about the regulations in the space. By forced transparency, I'm worried about someone walking into a factory in the middle of an unnamed city in an unnamed country, taking a picture of some poor, underpaid, overworked garment worker working with potentially hazardous materials, and that information instantly being spread to everybody all across the world. So transparency is no longer just a voluntary thing. It's no longer just a potential regulatory thing. Literally anyone with a camera, some of them smaller than my fingernail, can take a picture and broadcast it around the world. Trend 3, of course, everyone has to talk about artificial intelligence these days. What is fun and exciting are more and more AI systems that are helping consumers, retailers, suppliers, advocacy groups analyze incredibly large volumes of data to figure out whether a company might be at risk to things they don't know about, or might be providing misinformation intentionally or unintentionally to consumers. So big trends, we can come back to that here again in a minute. So I'm pausing slowly to see if anyone wants to interrupt with the question, or I'll keep babbling. Boy, you're lucky I don't have a seating chart. I would be one of those professors calling people out. All right, so here's the old school framework about retail sustainability. And I should be careful because I am in the NRF headquarters today. I don't want to shout out too loudly, but some of my new colleagues here, I've been here 2 years, they thought sustainable retail was all about changing the light bulbs in a store. It's all about we're going to make the store more energy efficient, or maybe we're going to recycle the coat hangers in the fashion retailer. So there are these like really old concepts around simply reducing energy use, water use at the store, right? Improving efficiency, improving productivity and customer service, community and employee initiatives. This is a wonderfully antiquated mid to late 1990s idea of sustainability in the retail space. And unfortunately, I still find it in textbooks and I still find it in lecture notes. This is not sustainability anymore. This is table stakes for the retail industry. If you're not already doing these things, you are missing all of the low-hanging fruit. And to be honest, you should go out of business soon. Because this is just really antiquated kind of perspective. So what people thought during this era is all I have to do is put some solar panels on the roof, put an electric vehicle charger out front, and look, I'm a sustainable retailer. And that's just not what it is. When you look at that full value chain of all of the hidden human health, environmental, and social impacts connected with the retail industry, some 90 to 98% is outside the realm of the picture you see here. It is outside the direct control of the retailer. It's not just store operations and logistics. The sustainability impacts, the sustainability opportunities are in that supply chain and in consumer behavior. And the most sophisticated retailers have figured this out. So what the more sophisticated retailers are doing with the sustainability space is they're actually embedding sustainability principles and goals inside of their strategies. And they are realizing that sustainability needs to be looked at from a supply chain perspective, from the consumer perspective, but also from an employee engagement, talent attraction perspective, from the investors who are asking more and more about what retailers are doing to address consumer demand, to address government pressure to reduce carbon footprint, And then that government piece. So the more sophisticated retailers are actually building sustainability strategies that encompass this full value chain, but also all of the additional stakeholders that are out there. Now, this slide, in fact, should include nonprofit groups, the environmental advocacy groups, the non-governmental organizations, but they tend to overlap with enough of the others that I've kind of left that out as a separate category. So going from there, what the retailers are really beginning to do, a lot of them are in fact setting science-based targets. So science-based targets is a methodology for anyone in any industry to actually make commitments to reduce their contributions to climate change. So science-based target initiatives, there's some 36 retailers that have already announced their science-based targets. NRF has a report on our website, so I'm happy to share that link with you. But what this means is retailers are saying they're going to reduce their scope 1 emissions, the direct emissions that they cause from logistics or running their buildings, scope 2 from buying energy, from buying electricity, and more importantly, scope 3. Retailers are saying as part of our sustainability strategy, we have to reduce all of those hidden human health environmental impacts upstream and downstream from retail operations. So some of the ways this is playing out, my wife and I, we had finally, after 20-something years, the washer and dryer died on us, all right? So we went to a well-known retail outlet. They might have a yellow price tag on the outside of their store, but I would never call out any specific retailer. But we went, when we originally bought the washer and dryer, using gas instead of electricity was considered more environmentally preferable. It was considered that was like a transitional thing. Most of our electricity was from a coal-powered plant. And so buying a natural gas washer and dryer were preferable. That's what we did. When we went to the local, and I wasn't actually there, my wife went without me to this retailer, someone on the sales floor said, "Are you sure you want to stick with gas? Because more and more people are switching to electric washers and dryers, because if they get solar panels, that's a better choice. Or if you're already buying renewable energy, or who's your electricity provider? Oh yes, that's mostly nuclear power. The better from an environmental perspective is to buy an electric washer and dryer." Now, she came home and told me that. I got crazy excited, like, someone on the sales floor told you that? I call up the sustainability person, the chief sustainability officer at that company. I'm like, what are you guys doing to train people on the sales floor? And the fascinating response was, our associates are doing this on their own. Sustainability is so embedded in what we're doing and so embedded in what our employees care about. They're doing this on their own. We have to be responsive because this is what people are looking for. So what I was just talking about was the carbon footprint of the products that retailers sell. So when you look at something like a washing machine or a dryer, the total footprint, the environmental footprint, is all of the raw materials to make the washer and dryer. It's the energy used in the manufacturing process. It's the fuel used to ship the washer and dryer to the retailer, from the retailer to me, the consumer. All of that is part of the footprint. And the largest part of the footprint, the environmental footprint for a washer and dryer, is how consumers use it. The type of electricity that's used, the type of energy that's used, how frequently they're washing, how full the laundry loads are. It's the consumer behavior. Same with fashion. One of my favorite stories is actually talking with the people at Levi's who when you ask what's the most significant sustainability impact from a single pair of blue jeans, it's not the cotton fields, it's not how the cotton is grown, it's not the water used in the manufacturing process, it's not the dyes, it's not the cutting and sewing, it's not the shipping. The most significant sustainability impact from a single pair of blue jeans is washing it. And so the CEO of Levi's for a while was running around telling people, look, as a company, we're trying to be more sustainable. Don't wash your blue jeans. You don't have to wash them after each use. You don't have to wash them after 10 use. If they start to get smelly, no lie, CEO of Levi's, if your jeans are starting to get a little smelly, put them in the freezer. The cold will kill the bacteria, right? Because what they were realizing is that retailers like a Levi's, which has its own stores, a Levi's is saying, we are trying to reduce all the hidden human health environmental impacts of the supply chain, but also of the consumer use phase. So what does all of this mean for a bunch of professors and students? What it means is that absolutely every single role in the retail industry, every single role in the retail industry is a sustainability role. Whether you're in marketing, whether you're the general counsel, whether you're in investor relations, whether you're a merchant, you're in supply chain or logistics, every single role in a retailer has a direct connection to sustainability. Every decision that everyone makes inside of a retailer has hidden human health, environmental, social, and community impacts. And so what the retail industry is doing is beginning to recognize that there is a huge role for retail to play as our economy shifts to one that is much less reliant on fossil fuels, that is more circular rather than linear, and retailers are really kind of stepping up. Different retailers are tackling a different part of that sustainability elephant. Very few kind of are trying to do all of it at once. But the way you tackle that sustainability elephant, the way you eat the sustainability elephant, you know, one bite at a time, I guess. So why don't I stop there? That's my contact info. I did drop I dropped my email and my LinkedIn into the chat earlier, but I would love to circle back and see if we actually answered the questions that people threw up before we started. Danae, did I get it right? Dr. Davis, did I answer your question?
I'm not quite sure.
Good, ask it again.
So I wanted to know how retailers were, how responsive were they, just out of the, well, they don't really have hearts, but what were the factors that kind of cause and influence retailers to act? And you made some reference to certainly the role of the consumer and costs that they have, but I just wanted to know, you know, how many, perhaps in their mission, right, and coming and onboarding, do they say, you know what, we got to have a real strong sustainability action and stance? So yeah,
I love it. Thank you. And there was a slide where we could have dug deeper in that, and I kind of glossed on it. So thank you for asking the question again. So the answer, this is going to be a horrible consultant answer. It depends, right? So different retailers clearly have different motivations for what's kind of driven them to sustainability. Some of the ones that got in earliest, and you might pick on I don't know, a Patagonia as an example, that became just part of the cultural ethos of that company. And in that particular case, Yvonne, that was his personal mission. My company, I own it. This is what we're going to do. In other cases with a company like Walmart, and this is a public story, there's a couple good books on what Walmart did. But from Walmart's perspective, Lee Scott, who was the CEO of Walmart when they started this sustainability initiative, was very forthright. Walmart had an image problem. At this point in time, People were protesting outside of Walmarts for shuttering small stores and small retailers and not paying people fair wages. And there were a ton of issues. And Walmart looked at it and said, what can we do to begin addressing these issues that also allows them to make money and more money? And they jumped into it as a PR relief valve. And along the way, found profit and cost savings. And boy, did that get that flywheel going. And then what Walmart realized, and this, it's still like, I was part of these, I still get like goosebumps. What Walmart realized is their bigger impact was asking their suppliers to do similar things. And so Walmart began working with suppliers on improving energy efficiency, transitioning to renewable energy, shifting up packaging. They were finding ways that saved the suppliers money, saved Walmart money, and provided consumer benefits all at once. And so there were lots of things happening at that point. Around this same time, all of a sudden, sustainability begins to emerge as a competitive dimension to attract consumers. Now, if you kind of think about who's Walmart's biggest competitor, and they'll deny this is why they did it, but I don't know, a bullseye comes to mind. What Walmart had figured out was that wealthier consumers tended to be more interested in sustainability, and which of their competitors had the wealthier consumers? That bullseye company. And so all of a sudden, the bullseye company is also pushing hard on sustainability. And as this begins to happen, the investors begin to take notice. So investors begin doing kinds of things and saying, hey, you know what? We don't understand this sustainability stuff, but those companies focused on sustainability tend to be performing better in the marketplace. And so the earliest investors in the space who were using this kind of stuff to make decisions, the earliest investors were saying, you know what? Sustainability is becoming a proxy for good management. If your company is sophisticated enough to dig into this sustainability stuff, you must have pretty strong governance inside the company. You must have a really clear strategy. And then the investor space continued evolving as, you know, they began finding other ways to analyze the sustainability benefits. So where we've consumers, so there's a flywheel, right? As these kinds of products become more widely available, consumers begin spending more money on those kinds of products. So that creates not consistently, but that creates a flywheel. And then you've got all these younger millennials, the older Gen Zs, now the alphas who are coming next, who are saying they do not want to work for companies that are not focused on sustainability. And so it's really interesting if you look across. So here's a research project for someone, please do it. Like, I've just never had the time to do this. I need an intern to do this. I honestly think there's a research design where you look at all of the retailers and identify where the first sustainability position was placed within the company. Because some placed that first sustainability position inside of marketing, some placed it inside the general counsel's office, some placed it inside investor relations, some placed it in marketing, some put it in human relations. So I honestly think there's two things happening. That's how the organization was thinking about which part of the elephant they were feeling. Oh, this is really an accounting issue, or oh, this is an IR issue. I think that's happening. I also think when you do that research and interview those people, I think what you're going to find is, I don't know, Jane was just really interested in sustainability and she happened to be a merchant and she kind of started doing it and we just kept giving her more stuff to do. So, but someone can kind of tease that out, because I think there's a thumbprint that exists inside of retail cultures now that depends on where that first sustainability hire was made.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, I went long-winded on you. Someone asked a mean question. She asked a really nice question.
Scott, that was such a cool perspective to think about, especially where sustainability role started. I never really thought about it that way. So I appreciate the long-winded answer, actually. I just kind of more have a comment of what you're saying is every role within retail is a sustainability role. So I'm almost wondering, it's more about developing students maybe critical thinking skills as they are going through their retail education, so that whatever role they end up in, they can really question things, dig deeper on things, something like that. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, thank you. That was the second question I wrote down, kind of that key skill set. And I, definitely going to be the critical thinking skills. Again, this is another opportunity for an academic study. I think most sustainability professionals have a liberal arts background or a humanities background. I think they've all picked up an MBA somewhere along the way, but I think the idea of thinking differently, like finding ways to just look at the world from a completely different perspective, or maybe even from kind of an ethical perspective, might actually be amplifying the success that some retailers are finding in the sustainability space. So when students ask me if I have a sustainability, so I'm majoring in sustainability, how do I get into the sustainability work? I tell them, make sure you take a bunch of business courses or you get an MBA to go along with what you're doing. If it's an MBA student, I'm pushing them to take humanities courses and kind of because what sustainability is really all about inside an organization now, it's organizational change, it's change management. And there are all sorts of soft skills that are required to kind of help people accelerate this transformation. So critical thinking, absolutely. Communication skills, incredibly big. Analytical skills, the ability to work in cross-functional teams. So some of the academic programs that I have found most intriguing they tend to be at really small schools, but they will put business students and English majors and science students in a room together to tackle a sustainability problem. And they're each bringing a different perspective to it and figuring out how to communicate effectively and reach solutions is helpful. I see a couple of business professors rolling their eyes at me. Is that an eye roll, Jeff?
Not at all.
Okay.
Actually, no, I totally agree with you, because I think, just thinking back to my own academic history, one of the things I got most out of my MBA program was working with engineers and people in nursing and whatnot, because we worked as a cohort. And to your point, regardless of the project, whether it was sustainability, you had to think differently. So I really appreciate it, Scott, you bringing that point up, because I think that's where sometimes we struggle as academics, this idea of, looking at things from multiple perspectives and what's the core thing that we want our students to get out of it. So thank you for that.
Be careful, Jeff. You never want to tell a non-academic they've got something right. So one quick story I'll share kind of to that point. A few years after I'd spent like 4 years working with Walmart, I went back to some of the executives and I'm like, what's the coolest thing that you learned from engaging with us on sustainability? And I was really prepared to like pat myself on the back. Hey, we understand carbon footprints or water footprints or, new consumer trends. I was like, and no, like consistently what I heard from the Walmart executives. Now, again, this was probably 2012, 2014. What they said, the best part of sustainability for them was it required different parts of the organization to collaborate in ways they had never collaborated before. So sustainability became like a secret sauce for cross-functional collaboration. And that cross-functional collaboration was required by sustainability, but there were all sorts of non-sustainability benefits that also evolved from it. Someone's got to have a mean question.
I have a question.
Go for it.
You know, most of the things that you mentioned is kind of a culture that is changing within the organization, and primary purpose is kind of societal need and consumer trend change. But still, we don't have a clear indication from the consumption side in terms of how much they are actually spending. I mean, willing to spend more. But the organization is willing to change. My question is, you just mentioned that it's all about the companies trying to kind of lead in a way and compete for sustainability. You mentioned that. So what type of benchmark do they use to judge what is enough and what is not enough? What is competitive amount? I'm sure there is certain, you don't want to go overboard, sacrificing your profit or, purpose of existence. But how far is better and how far is going along with peers, and that question. So I'm trying to, I know it's the progress, it's not, at one point and we are going to be 100% sustainable. That's not the, that's not the way that we should think. But at this time, I mean, we have COVID, there's a supply chain problems and a production problem at the same time, and you have to make profit and you have to support your employees. But at the same time, you have to think about sustainability. There's so many things in the equation. So, I'm trying to see how the companies are managing what is acceptable,
Yeah.
acceptable and not.
I love that question. And the answer again is going to be, it depends. Like, different retailers are beginning to look at it very differently. So there are, again, I've not seen a good taxonomy that writes all of this out. If I wrote on my whiteboard, there's some kind of simple taxonomies, right? In the early days, there were an awful lot of companies talking about reducing their carbon intensity, right? So the amount of carbon I generate versus my sales. And so the idea was, I'm going to keep growing sales while reducing the amount of carbon per sale, right? So there was this kind of carbon intensity score. With science-based targets, retailers are saying they want to reduce their absolute carbon budgets. So that's one metric. At several conferences recently, again, this has been Levi's. Levi's has said they want to sell less product. So Levi's is saying they want to sell fewer garments to more people. And they are really emphasizing the durability of their products. They are creating systems so that consumers can resell their blue jeans through a Levi's website. And they are actually beginning to kind of tackle that third rail issue of overconsumption. We see a lot of other retailers that are also beginning to do that. They're beginning to say, you know what? If our percentage of resale retail, like we're selling the same products more than once to different consumers, as that percentage increases, they can decrease some of the actual need to manufacture new product. Whether that actually plays out in the long run, it's a struggle. But I have talked with retail executives who have said, look, we are in a transition phase. There are retail executives already imagining a world in which consumers do not ever own a product. They simply lease a product from a retailer. And that's happening with things like automobiles. People are comfortable leasing an automobile, like that's no big deal. In Europe, there are companies that are leasing appliances like washers and dryers and refrigerators. There's Rent the Runway, where people are renting clothes. So there are actually people talking about those kinds of models emerging. And as they emerge, the incentive becomes create more durable goods and sell them multiple times or lease them multiple times. I am not going to say there's some kind of nirvana solution where we all kind of get to, hug a tree or something, but it is fascinating to me because I would have not predicted that to be true 10 years ago. But you're asking the absolute right question. Can we buy our way out of this sustainability crisis?
Thank you so much. And actually gave me some ideas about the benchmark actual numbers that you could use.
Cool, please. So what's fun, right? I have access to all these retailers. At some point, there might be a survey that we go out, and so it's possible that we might be able to kind of, flesh some of these things out by asking our retailers to respond to a survey or something.
Do you feel that the new generations who are coming into the industry, they are actually some sort of force of moving the organization to be more sustainable, or is it really based on the consumer trend or like a government registration pressures?
Yeah, it's all of the above. It is absolutely all of the above. Yeah, as consumers get more interested in this stuff and employees get more interested in this stuff, progress happens. As progress happens, regulators think, oh, they can accelerate the progress by requiring everybody to do it, which has its own challenges, of course. But it really is, all of these areas are making progress simultaneously. I've joked before around kind of this sustainability singularity moment, where the tools are appearing, the data is appearing, consumers and employees and strategies are all beginning to focus on this. And suddenly we've achieved like consciousness the way artificial intelligence might play. But yeah, they're good questions. I see a question in the chat. You think it's possible to break from the system of a global supply chain to local supply chains? Yeah, that is fascinating. There are retailers that are very, very busy with reshoring strategies and backing away from some of the risks of global supply chains. So I think that is absolutely a piece of what people are trying to solve for. Where I see that kind of local supply chain really happening, though, are a lot of the small startups. The number of people that reach out to me and say, hey, I'm starting a new fashion retailer, and my next door neighbor owns a cotton field, and like I know someone who gens it, and they are really so there's kind of two things happening. There are new innovations and business models and people starting companies with sustainability as the goal, and there are larger existing organizations trying to re-engineer their systems to address the weaknesses of global supply chains. So we'll see. I see you've come on camera. Do you want to elaborate more on the question? Oops, and you're on mute.
Yes, sorry. Actually, I am studying a local small retailer and sustainability. And yeah, but like you said, local innovative suppliers are doing it. Manufacturers and small businesses are doing it. But then the question arises whether it is sustainable for them or economically viable for them.
Yep. Exactly.
Because there is no economy of scale, and the products that they are producing are pretty expensive, and not everybody can afford it.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm seeing. And there's a couple people have written books on that just recently, where they talk about their struggles of trying to build a truly sustainable business. So scale becomes the problem. But again, and this is where the math nerds in the group can start playing, right? If how much do you have to get consumption to come down in favor of more durable goods before, the economies of scales meet at some point? But, I'll confess, I'm big on all this stuff, but I'm not going to spend $1,000 for a shirt. But I love the fact that some people will pay $1,000 for a shirt. I didn't pay $1,000 for a fancy flat screen television, but enough people did that I could then buy one for $300.
True.
So,
yeah, and I had one more question. How would you describe the characteristics of a sustainable retailer that does not come across as greenwashing?
So years ago, I wrote a report called The Sins of Greenwashing. So greenwashing is very, very, very much part of my personal DNA. There's a lot of retailers that have recently gotten dragged in the press or by different nonprofit groups for greenwashing. And it's become kind of a loaded term that can sometimes mean providing demonstrably false information or demonstrably misleading information. But it's also being used to say, hey, my part of the elephant isn't covered in your definition of sustainability, therefore you're greenwashing. And so I'm a little nervous that the greenwashing concept has been turned into this black or white absolute yes or no. And I think we really need to think about progress as a continuum. And I think we have to find a way to acknowledge and recognize people that are taking early steps on that continuum. And so what I do tell people when they ask about, like, how do I avoid greenwashing? I'm telling them, like, you can't. Someone is going to accuse you of greenwashing, accept it. If you're going to talk about sustainability, someone is going to accuse you of greenwashing. And so be very, very clear about what you're doing, how it fits into a broader sustainability story. Don't claim you've solved everything. And part of the challenge too is that some solutions that look sustainable right now will not be sustainable if the circular economy really takes off. So some people are building solutions that will only work and be sustainable when the context shifts. So you have short-term sustainability and long-term sustainability, and that gets to like how companies are trying to transition. You can't bet everything on, oh, I'm going to bet this far out in the future, because if the consumers don't join you on that journey, you've bankrupted yourself. At the same time, if you only look short-term, you might be missing opportunities that your competitors are seeing.
Thank you. That was a very wonderful insight.
And
And
I hope you can turn it into academic language and publish something.
that's what I'm working on. I'm working with Fibershed. I don't know
Oh,
if you've
yeah.
heard of that.
Cool, right? Yeah.
I'm working with them on, that's my dissertation project, and this is what I'm talking to them about.
That's excellent. Yeah, there's some cool people in that Fibershed space. So yeah, very good.
Thank you.
Oops, did we go over already? What? No, we've got more time, right?
Yeah, we've got more time as long as you're available.
I'm
And
loving it.
anyone, if they have class or anything, I think they can go, and since it's recorded. So
Oh, come
yeah,
on, professors are never on time to class. I saw that look, Greg.
Scott, I have a question, and this is probably a deviation from your discussions today. And that has to do with ESG and sustainability becoming part of the culture wars, and how that's going to impact current consumer thinking about sustainability.
Yeah.
And, as academics, we typically don't look at these issues, but coming through the lens of the consumer's mind frame, it definitely, I believe, plays a role in retailer or upper management thinking of their efforts in sustainability changes that will reflect their sustainability stance in the overall marketplace. Any observations you have from your perspective? Very few people can really comment on it. Since you are at the NRF, you have the view that most don't.
So, and we are recording, so I'm going to be very careful with my answer. Yes, it's an absolute issue. What I have seen internally in conversations, those companies whose senior leadership team have been very skeptical of sustainability for whatever reason, personal beliefs, political beliefs, whatever it is, for those that have been more skeptical, they are using this anti-ESG as, see, I told you so, and we're not doing it. The companies that have been making significant progress in this space over decades are saying, we'll just shift the language that we're using to talk about what we're doing. From a consumer perspective, the research that I've seen is consumers have no clue what ESG is to begin with, do not connect it with sustainability. The ESG framework was investor-focused language, right? It's not consumer-focused, so the consumers aren't making those connections. And retailers ultimately are about making money. And if selling more sustainable products and behaving more sustainably is attracting more consumers, then gosh darn it, they need to be doing it. And so there are kind of like interesting conversations around, okay, we're going to be doing this anyway. People, we'll just be careful how we talk about it. But what are you seeing?
Yeah, so it's mostly managing the terminology they use and the conversations they have when it comes to, you don't see any impact on the consumers. Again, with consumers, it's a bifurcated world. There are some consumers who believe in it, others that don't. And most of us are making those decisions product by product whenever we decide to make those choices.
Absolutely. And some of the best, most sophisticated consumer insight research that gets beyond simplistic questions like, would you like to buy more sustainable products? Yes or no? Would you pay more? How much more would you pay for sustainable? Right? That research is useless.
No.
But the research that digs deep into, how important is it for you to understand, how fairly the workers were paid in a factory? Or how important is it for you to know that this particular product benefited a local farmer? Those kinds of questions, there's no difference in political perspective around the answers that you get. And so, talking about specific attributes rather than a sustainability framework, you start to realize there's a lot more common interests than some people recognize.
Sure. Thank you.
So consumer benefits tend to trump political ideologies.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
I have one question.
Please.
Yeah. What do you think are the difficulties in following or using sustainable products, both from the viewpoint of the consumer as well as from retailer for selling it or moving the products?
I think I know what the question is, but would you repeat it? Because I've got a story I want to tell, but I don't know how relevant it is. So reframe the question for me real quick.
Yeah, but why is it difficult to be sustainable in your habits? I would, both from consumption as well as distribution from the retailer point.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other field of research about consumer motivations and kind of how it works. I guess kind of the quick, simple response I would have here. The quick, simple response is the research shows a couple of things. Consumer research shows consumers say they want to do it. It also shows consumers don't understand what it is. So there's also research that shows that consumer behavior change sometimes precedes their attitude change. So finding a consumer and saying, wow, you bought that with reduced packaging, that's great, you're a sustainable consumer, when they might have bought it with reduced packaging because they hate all the excess stuff they have to recycle at home. So they might not have been thinking that way. So helping consumers connect their consumer benefits with a sustainability behavior can kind of accelerate things. I have some good friends. They are medical doctors. One of them got an additional degree, I don't know what you call it, additional certification in weight loss. And a lot of the research that she has shared with me is similar to consumer insights, right? You don't have to tell someone who wants to lose weight that here are 30 things you have to do. You've got to join the gym. You got to do this much exercise. You got to change your diet. You've got to, you've got to get better at, you just congratulate them for each small step and know that it's a journey of reinforced behaviors. And consumers are each on their own different journey in this kind of sustainability space. So, which interestingly, I sat in a presentation late last week around how AI might be used to actually help individual consumers accelerate their sustainability behaviors by identifying things they've already bought and congratulating them for a step they've taken, and then suggesting other products or behaviors.
That's interesting.
But,
and about retailers, is it difficult for retailers to adopt the sustainability factor in their business?
Yes and no. So I think there's a learning curve that the entire retail industry is going through, from like no knowledge of sustainability to like lots of knowledge and like strategic integration of sustainability into business strategy. So there's this kind of learning curve. Every retailer is at a different part on that learning curve. Every executive inside of every retailer is in a different part of that learning curve. And some retailers have been very effective at intentionally breaking up silos and helping people understand that sustainability is an all of organization challenge, not specific roles. So again, the answer is it varies, but I think that's true of any change in society. An example I probably used in New York at the NRF Foundation conversation are computers. I am old enough. I remember when computers first started entering the workforce. And I'm old enough to remember when people thought only the accounting department needs a computer. They're the only ones that would need it because it's all about numbers and stuff. And there are people who would be still to this day surprised that we all have computers now and we all use them for different reasons, right? And now we see this with like AI, as people are kind of like, how does that affect? Like, how can I use it to better understand my supply chain? How can I do it better for marketing? And like, so people are realizing these things affect every part of a retailer, and that they are most powerful if there's some sort of coherent strategy for leveraging the benefits across all those different parts of the retailer. So sustainability is a little squishier maybe than AI, but it's the same general concept. There's an awful lot of benefits when everyone in the organization understands the concepts in a similar way, that have common goals, and they can collaborate across the organization to meet those goals.
Thank you. That is very clear. Thanks a lot.
And easier said than to do.
True.
Have I exhausted your ears at this point?
This is wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I'm actually just wondering too, like, we've talked a lot about sort of like consumer data, how it translates to many practices and things like that. I'm wondering, like, we know we all teach like the Gen Z consumer and things. So I'm wondering too, and I guess that I think this is related to a previous question, but we see these sort of generational shifts. So and what consumers really care about. And so do you see sort of like a new wave coming with like a new workforce and like new values and things like that? Just wondering your thoughts on that.
That's fun. Yeah, I forget you get to play in that demographic constantly. So the easy answer is yes, but the more challenging answer is like, I would be fascinated, like ask your students how many of you think sustainability is important, and then ask them how many of you have been shopping Shein lately.
Yeah.
Or, because there is this kind of fascinating disconnect between one's aspirations and their behavior. And so I think that's kind of a fun thing to kind of play with. There's also this kind of idea that we see persistently in the consumer insights research. A consumer has bought one, or two cool garments from the thrift shop, and then they order, $200 worth of stuff from Shein. And they like feel like they're sustainable because, they did buy these one or two used items. So those kinds of things are still, but consumer aspirations, when a retailer or a brand makes it easy for consumers to afford to be the person they want to be, that's a game winner. So people are moving in that direction. The other thing, I do see a bunch of young people that will seek me out at events, NRF events, and they're like, hey, I just graduated, I've got my MBA, I want to be sustainable, and this company like just sucks. They're not doing everything they need to be doing. And it's because what we are learning and teaching in books and reading about and kind of mapping it out, and here's what, they hear me speak, like, here's what's going on. And they're like, that's not what I'm seeing inside of my company. That's kind of one of the big challenges, is helping new employees be change managers, right? To be change agents and find ways, help them help the old folks do things differently. And a kind of a common mistake I've seen among particularly people that are brand new in a sustainability role is they think their role, congratulations, you're an assistant manager for sustainability in, this. They think their job is to tell people what to do. You have to do it this way. You have to, rather than like really leveraging those kind of collaborative skills, asking really powerful questions, understanding the different business pressures. And I think that's a skill that I would like to think it can be taught. Maybe it's something you just get beat up enough at work that you learn, but it does bother me that some very enthusiastic sustainability new hires, sustainably focused new hires, feel like they're getting beat up. And I think it's because they haven't quite learned to listen and to understand that change just doesn't happen overnight. Although I share their frustration that it should happen overnight.
Question again.
Go for it.
Yeah. Like new sustainability hires, you say that they get beaten up. Sometimes they feel they are getting beaten up. Do you think government legislations or policies need to be done or passed to make sure that there are some basic sustainability measures that need to be followed by everybody? That, yeah.
It's an important question. So I work for a trade association. By nature, trade associations are resistant to any regulation because trade associations are the first to hear about how the legislation isn't doing what was intended. And here's what they didn't think about. And hey, they told us we have to meet this deadline in 2 years, but they still haven't even published guidance on how we do it. So regulation ends up being very, very complicated, far more complicated than I would have ever thought during my environmental nonprofit days. Ultimately, there probably are roles. If you look at things like, mandatory seatbelt laws and things like that. But I think it will be a long time before wide swaths of the trade association world are embracing legislation as a solution.
Okay, thanks.
Now, when we turn off the recording, no, I didn't say that. No, I will say legislation has proven, I thought that was a simple thing. When I joined the trade association, I actually thought that was a really simple issue. And it turned out, no, it's far more complicated than I understood.
I have talked to some farmers, and what they say is like, if legislation comes into place, they are walking away because it's too expensive for them and they cannot actually go through the exercise of doing it. It's too expensive.
Well, and I actually am seeing that kind of stuff play out. In some cases, even the threat of legislation is preventing some companies from investing in sustainability initiatives because they're worried they need that money to like fill out the paperwork. So it's a little frustrating, but yeah, I have not figured out that piece.
And what are your thoughts on certification, sustainability certification?
So I owned a sustainability certification program, right? I used to sell a certification in this space, a multi-attribute environmental focused certification. I still think certifications have an important role. I also think that they are insufficient. They are an important but insufficient tool. So it is probably a good point on that kind of learning curve we talked about. It's probably something towards the lower third, the top third, that first quadrant, that's 4. The top part, it's like early in the journey, people are like, oh, these are the rules I need to follow. And then once you start understanding, wait a minute, this is why they want me to follow those rules or check the boxes, you can begin to be a lot more strategic about what you're doing. And that way you can start measuring the ROI on the sustainability investments you're making. And that's both return on investment and rate of impact. Like how much impact are you actually generating?
Thank you.
All right.
Any further questions?
You know where to find me. My email is in that thread somewhere. My LinkedIn is in that thread somewhere. If I had a magic wand, I could wave the magic wand at this group of people. I would say, create a research consortium around sustainability in the retail space so that you're pooling your own expertise and research, and that, you make requests of a trade association like ours, here's the survey we want, and it covers all of these different issues, as opposed to everyone doing it piecemeal. But that might take a big magic wand, I know.
Well, thank you so much. It's given us lots to think about and lots to research too. So that's pretty exciting. So much of what we do is in that space. So thank you so much on behalf of ACRA, and really helping to empower us as educators and researchers with knowledge and new ideas. So thank you so much, Scott, and the NRF for your time and sharing your expertise. We really appreciate it a lot.
Cool. And I'll send you a quick link that just lists a few of the things that I might have referenced in passing, just to save you some Googles.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Have fun, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. We
Thank you.
enjoyed it.
Bye.